y'all, this is Sheila Ryan. I'm a Cuddle Ambassador with Shannon Fabrics. I made this gorgeous block from new Quilting Cuddle with my Accuquilt, and then I pieced it on my sewing machine. I want to show you how to do that. This block is called the Jewel Box, and I did it with the Accuquilt 16-inch Qube die cutting system. I'm going to walk you through the process of putting the block together and getting it all done so that you can make a beautiful Quilting Cuddle quilt just like this one. This is done with 4 blocks. So each block finishes at 16 inches. So I put 4 together. So now I have a 32 by 32 quilt top. And it's just so soft and snuggly. I can't wait to show you how to do it. So come along with me and let's make something pretty. All right, let's go. All right, this is the book I'm using that is a companion to the Accuquilt Qube system. So the cubes have several different shapes. They come in lots of different sizes. I've got the 16-inch block here, and each block, when the parts go together, they make a 16-inch block. So the dies are no bigger than an 8-inch size square. Let's open this one up so you can kind of see how they come. Actually, this is the one with the cutting mat in it. So here's the block folder with the bigger dies, and then there's one with the smaller dies. And the dies are in here, and you pick the one you want or you need, and then you can make all kinds of patterns with just one box here, like this 16-inch cube. So there's a little pattern book in there, and it has all kinds of patterns in here. This Quilt in a Day Go Qube book is something that I got separately, but I love it. It's by Eleanor, and it just has hundreds. It has so many blocks in it. Let me see. And she originally wrote it, yeah, hundreds, at least over 100. She originally wrote it for the 6-inch, 8-inch, 9-inch, 10-inch, and 12-inch blocks for the Accuquilt system, but now there is a 4-inch block and a 16-inch block and a 5-inch block too, actually. And so you can use all of those size cubes with this because these shapes are in every one of the cubes. It just depends on how they finish. So we're going to use the biggest one, the 16-inch one. So when I'm using a 16-inch block, like right here, when I have 4 16-inch blocks together, I should end up with a quilt that's about 32 by 32 inches. Now, I love using Accuquilt because generally everything finishes at the right size. I don't have a whole lot of errors in cutting because everything is cut with a die. As long as I keep my sewing 1/4-inch seam allowances just right, I do pretty good. So let's get over to the cutting and start that process. I've got all my fabrics picked out. Let me show you what we're going to be using. I'm using this gorgeous Quilting Cuddle from Shannon Fabrics. This is the Stonewash line. It's barely basics. The Quilting Cuddle is a cuddle minky that is super thin and very, very stable. So the length of the pile on this is just 1.5 millimeters long. So while the pile is short and the fibers are short, it is very, very soft and luxurious. This is the color called Denim, and I am just obsessed with this fabric. So we're going to be using the denim, the black, and then this one called, there's just a scrap of it called Sand, to put that quilt together. And the book is going to tell me all of the pieces that I need. I'm pretty sure I'm going to need a bunch of squares, so I've kind of taken the pattern from the book and I've calculated, I multiplied it by 4 because I'm going to be making 4 blocks. So I'm going to cut all of my blocks out at the same time, get them in stacks, and then I'm going to pay attention to my nap as I put them together. Quilting Cuddle, like all cuddle fabrics, has a nap. And so when you rub it one way or the other, you will feel a difference in the texture. And so we want to make sure that everything is going down so that we pat the quilt going this way, it's smooth all the way down, even through those pieced areas. So that's what I'll be doing, and let's get to it. Okay, this is speeded up a little bit, but I'm using my Accuquilt Go Bolt with 2 layers of Quilting Cuddle at a time, and then covering it with the mat so that I get all the pieces that I need. This doesn't take very long at all. I've measured out what I need for making 4 blocks, and I'm simply going to repeat this process with the Go Bolt until I have all of my pieces. Okay, I've got all my blocks together. I'm back at the machine, and I am finding the page in the Quilt in a Day book that has the jewel box pattern on it. And so I'm going to get my blocks and start piecing them together. So what I'm doing is I have my machine set up with a 90-14 stretch needle because this is a little bit of a thicker fabric. I'm using a back stitch every time I start and stop. And when I start sewing with Quilting Cuddle, I'm actually starting on the fabric. And if I need to, I will back up just a tiny bit. And here I'm not using pins because my fabric is all going with the naps in the correct direction. Like the naps are not fighting against each other. You'll see me petting my fabric quite a bit just to make sure that everything is in the same direction so that when the whole block is together, all of the pieces will be going in the same direction. Now, I am lifting my presser foot, placing the fabric in underneath the foot so that the bead dogs don't have to take it in. I don't have my single hole plate on, but if my fabric was going down into the bobbin area, I would definitely put that single hole plate on and use my 1/4 inch foot. I'm just using the regular foot on my sewing machine, but I do have the presser foot pressure relaxed quite a bit. So it's not quite on 0, but it is not pushing down as much as it would need to if, let's say I was doing quilting cotton or even something slinkier. It's almost to 0 on this machine. You'll need to check your settings and see how your machine works with Quilting Cuddle. Now, I am back stitching at the end of each block because I don't want anything to come out. And also, because I'm using a longer stitch length, if I don't just back up a stitch or two, then my stitches are a lot more susceptible to coming undone at the end. Okay, so again, I'm just going to speed up through this process, but I simply put all of my squares together for these little patchwork areas inside the jewel box, and the pattern tells me exactly how to put my squares together. So I'm chain piecing all of these pairs of the squares, and then I'll start doing the half square triangles and get those sections pieced together. And once I have all of the units done that go in pairs, I'll start putting the pairs into sets of 4 or into those bigger sections. But right now, you just see me matching up the nap so that my naps are not fighting against each other as I seam these little pieces together. And then when I do the triangles, you'll notice that one of the things that I'm doing is I am going to pin the triangles. And I'm pinning the triangles because that edge that is going across the block, it's a half square triangle. Not only is that edge a little bit stretchy because it's the bias of the fabric, but Quilting Cuddle itself is a knit fabric and has its own stretch just across the true width of the fabric. So with that bias edge, I have even more stretch than I normally would. And usually that's not a big deal, but I'm trying to keep everything nice and flat so that I don't have any puckers in the top of my quilt. So if you need to stay in control more of your fabric, there are little things you can do. You can use wonder clips. You can use a strong pin like the clover flower head pins. The strong ones, not the fine ones. You want the ones that come in a box or 22 a card, but they're the strongest thickness of pins. You could also use your wonder clips to keep the fabric pieces together. And a lot of times I will do that as well. Because this edge is so short, I'm not going to use a whole lot of pins. I'm just double checking again, always checking for that nap. You'll see me patting the fabric a lot every time I put new pieces of fabric together because I want everything to be consistent. Okay, let's just speed run through some of these next piecing parts until we get to the triangles, and then we'll look at that again. Okay, here we are, ready to do those half square triangles and put them together. And you can see I'm just double checking for which way my nap is going. Now, because of the pattern of where the lights and darks go together for these pieces on our bigger block, I'm being a little bit more careful figuring out which way the nap is going. Also, because it's cut on an angle, it may be a little bit more difficult for you to tell. So just take your time. If you need to, make a mark on the back of the fabric with a fine point permanent marker. Sometimes a ballpoint pen will work, but sometimes the ink comes off and I don't want to risk anything. So I'd rather use a permanent marker on the back with a light touch so that it doesn't go through. And again, you can see I am using some pins here to keep that bias edge from stretching out on me. Once I've pinned it, I let the fabric relax. I am not stretching the fabric in any way before I put it underneath the needle. I'm letting it relax, pinning it together, and then starting my stitching so that nothing is pulling on that bias edge. If I pull, I'm going to have a stretched out edge, and then my triangle pieces, while they might go together and match up all the way at the end, they're not going to fit into my larger block if I've stretched them out of shape. So I'm being very careful just to let them relax. Now, I'm not going full speed here as well. I'm slowed down quite a bit from my normal sewing because I'm doing these pieces on stretchy fabric that is a little bit thicker. I just feel that I get a better seam when I'm slowed down just a little bit and paying attention to how everything is actually joining together. Okay. There's just a lot more piecing here. So I think we can go ahead and speed run through this next part. I'm just putting the pieces together. Same thing over and over again. That's what quilting is. Cutting up pieces of fabric and putting them back together in different configurations. So let's just speed this up just a little bit. Okay, we've got all those sets of 2 together now. And I'm going to take these sets of 2 and I'm going to make units of 4 pieces. So I've got everything, I've gotten the number of pieces that I started with completely halved because I have sets of 2 together. I'm putting my, double checking that nap again because I want these 4 patch units to be all going in the same direction so that my little 4 patches have the nap going all the correct way. So I have 2 sets with the black on one side and the sand on the other, and then other sets with the sand on the left and the black on the right side. So when all the naps are going up and down, they just go in 2 different piles, and that way I can just take one from the top pile and one from the bottom pile and put those 4 patches together. So that's all I'm doing right here. And then I'll get those units set and sewed into sets of 4. And then I'll start adding my half square triangles to the side of them, just like the pattern says to do. So on the back of these, you can see how the seam allowance on the back with Quilting Cuddle opens up really nicely. So I'm going to nest my seams matching that center seam really well and adding a few pins right there just to hold the seam allowances open so that my corners are nice and tidy in the middle of that 4 patch. This takes just a little bit of time but it's totally worth it to
and
get
the half square triangle
those points
together
right in the middle.
make the bigger
And then once
block.
that is pinned together, I'm going to use a couple more pins at the beginning and end of where I'm going to start stitching, so that my block ends up with the width the same for both of those set of two pieces together. I'm sure there's a more technical name for those units as we piece them into blocks, but basically I want the sets of two to match up to each other so that they can become a tidy set of four. So you can see me adding pins. I've got the pins on the ends and I've got the pins right at the middle. Now I am using those Clover flower head pins. These are the strongest pins that Clover makes, and they're great for using with cuddle fabrics because they're very long, which means that if I was using a fluffier Lex Cuddle, I wouldn't lose them as easily in the fabric. But also they're very strong. They have a 0.7 millimeter steel shaft, so they don't bend very easily. With heavier fabrics, we do want to use a heavier pin. So let's just get everything pinned together tidy, very tidy. Because we're putting these pieces together and I've got the naps now going a little bit differently than they were just side to side, you may find that it's a little bit wigglier and a little bit more tedious to get those pieces of fabric to be just right. But we're just going to use a lot of pins. We're going to pin it until we don't, till the fabric just does what we want it to do. So I'm just going to go slowly again, guiding it underneath the presser foot, making sure that my seams stay open as I cross them on those 4 patches, and then slowly sewing to the end. I just want to make sure that I'm maintaining my 1/4 inch all the way through to the end of that seam. Okay, now that I've got that set of 4 blocks put together, I'm going to, again, manipulate my seams all open so that it stays nice and flat, so that when I get to the point of quilting this with the backing and the batting, everything is nice and flat. Now, I can press it too, but I'm not going to right now. I'm not, that's probably why I'm still learning to be a quilter, because I'm not a good presser. So I've got my half square triangle units and my 4 patch units, and I'm going to put them together, double checking my nap. Now the pattern will tell you which side the blocks, the half square triangles, need to be on the 4 patch units. But really it's just 2 4 patch units and 2 half square triangle blocks that make up this jewel box. And then once you have this whole block put together, there are a ton of different ways then you can sort it out. So I've done a couple of examples that I'll pop up here on the screen just to show you different ways that you can arrange these blocks and then get different looks. So I kind of wanted these to kind of be a X shape with the black squares going through the centers. So it makes kind of like an X, and then those blue and sand things kind of are diamonds on the edge. There's just lots of options, and there's not one right way. If you're following a pattern, of course, follow the pattern. But if you're just winging it, that's fine too. The nice thing about using the cube system with the Accuquilt is that if I'm doing units with one set of dies from one of the cubes, my pieces or my parts of the units are going to fit together, because that's how the cubes are designed. They're the different units that make up the bigger blocks, and they all work together. So as long as I'm paying attention to kind of the nap of the fabric, I'm not really thinking too hard about anything else. Now I could make a big plan and I could, follow a bigger pattern, but I'm just learning here and I'm trying to keep my nap straight. So that's one thing that I'm going to think about right now, is just keeping my naps straight. Okay, let's speed this up again, because all I'm doing is pinning, matching, sewing, pinning, matching, and sewing over and over again until I get all of these units together. We'll speed that up. right, there we go. We've got some block units done. So this is the unit for the jewel box. Now, I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to show you different ways that you could put these blocks together. Okay, before these were all sewn together, I just wanted to show you a couple of other options. This is how I laid mine out, but you could also do them like this. This is just the same block, just spun differently. And then this is the same block, just sitting the same way. All right, I gotta go get these quilted all together. So have fun, play in your sewing room, play with your quilting cuddle, play with the blocks. See what happens when you spin things around. Just have fun and happy sewing.